Okay, we're good, I think.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another JIGS session. I'm Nicole, and tonight we have with us Emma, who's very busy with the technology side of things and making sure everything's up and running on the group. And we've also got Daniela back with us, who hasn't been with us for the last couple. So it's good to have you back, Daniela. So tonight's session, or wherever you are in the world, it's actually early in the morning for me, focusing on this book here, Rewind. And like a lot of people, I was very drawn to the cover of this one, and we were sort of excited to get into it. Although we have found that there are some things that were less exciting than what the cover was. So basically, the book is a biographical book going through Michael's life, but with I guess the concept twist with this one is that it's and as the title suggests, rewind. So it's actually in reverse, starting rather than starting from birth and going through to the end. That way, it essentially starts at the end and works its way backwards. So I was quite excited for a book like that because, like many of us, and we've discussed this a few times on the JIG sessions before, as we all get to the end of these books, it can be quite emotional for us. So the idea of going backwards, we thought that would be exciting. So we're looking forward to getting in and discussing this one. We're going to start this morning talking about some of the positives, which I think we all want to have a bit of a discussion about the cover. It does have a different cover. Some of the other copies, and I'm not sure which edition is the different one, but there is a black cover. Emma, do you have the black one? Yeah. So the cover being obviously one of the positives ever. I think everyone's quite excited about the artwork on this one. Not that your cover is not good; it's a good cover as well. But the fact that it's an art piece where Michael's face is all the lyrics of his later songs, and then of course we have on the back little Michael with some of the earlier songs from the Jackson 5 and the Jacksons, and some of his earlier Motown solos as well. And on my edition, it's actually, if you take the dust jacket off, it's embossed into the book itself, which is cool, same as on the back. So that's really cool. I think we were all very excited about that. Everyone agrees that the cover's great. Daniela, do you have this edition, or have you got the one that Emma
Exactly,
has?
Nicole. I have this edition. Yeah.
Same one.
And this is just brilliant to look at. And this has drawn me to this book because from the outside, it makes a really good impression. And it's something nice to put on a coffee table. Yeah. And it's like nicely done. Like the cover is nicely done. The dust shirt is nicely done. The paper is very good. The photographs are brilliant. Yeah, from this part, I really like it. And if you look at these heads, there are all the titles. I mean, we have it, but maybe people at home don't have it. The hair is made out of titles of Michael's songs. This is really nice, yeah. Like this is the older songs, and this is the older songs, and this is the younger songs, just like the picture shows you.
Yeah, it is beautiful, isn't it? And like you said, I made the comment earlier on in reading the book that it certainly would make a nice coffee table book because it is a lovely book to look through with all the photos and stuff. But unfortunately, some of the reading is disappointing.
Yeah, that's exactly what we all concluded. Yeah. Never judge a book by its cover. It has never been more true.
Almost in reverse of how we usually use that saying, but in this case, it's a beautiful book, beautiful cover, but some of the text less beautiful, I suppose. I did find there were obviously some other positives. Obviously, it's not all terrible throughout. There are some good parts. Being that it does go in reverse order, it's certainly as a fan, some of the earlier stuff it's when I say earlier, I mean the first part of the book, which is actually the latest stuff. So it's a bit backwards when I speak about it. But those parts of Michael's later years in life are written with a very contemptuous tone, whereas towards the end of the book, more sort of positivity comes through and does shine through. I did think that for the most part, the author's reviews and descriptions of pretty much all the albums are quite positive. Even the likes of Invincible, which often gets negative reviews in some instances, it's quite, he speaks about it quite positively, although as with Invincible, history and probably even Dangerous, there's nowhere near as much attention on them as what there is the earlier albums. It's as if in this author's mind, like he's viewing, in my opinion, I think his opinion of Michael was much higher earlier in Michael's life, and then his opinion seems to really decline. So in the book, it's sort of a low opinion, and then it comes up at the end. That's how I found it to be anyway. Any other positives that anybody
for me,
had? I thought oh, sorry, Emma.
No, sorry. I'm really sorry, guys. There's a really bad time delay again. The weather's terrible for us. It's torrential rain outside, and it always interferes with the connection. But I actually made a list of quite a few positives. Like when I started reading the book, it's very easy to get very angry very quickly with this book. But once I finished it and I wrote down what I actually liked about it, I did like quite a bit about it. I obviously really like the photos, and I like the fact that, you know, it's not just kind of random photos throughout. You know, there'll be, you know, a section where it's just a era, and or a particular event, and there'll be lots of sort of pictures of events, so it kind of transports you back there. You've got a really lovely timeline in the middle of the book, which I haven't really seen before in another book, but it kind of, there's like 4 or 6 pages, and it kind of gives you all the key details of Michael's career. So I think that's quite cool, and it's quite detailed. So I liked that. He includes at the back, you've got an index, you've got references. I mean, when I first started reading this book, one of my negatives was going to be, I don't know how well researched this is. But actually, when you look at the back, you do see that there are quite a few references. So I think it is semi-well researched. Obviously, there are lots of errors and inconsistencies that we saw. Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Nicole. But, you know, you can tell from the references that this isn't someone who's just read a couple of articles and, you know, tried to write a book with no knowledge. He has done, you know, quite a bit of research. So I'll give him that as well. I already said it's particularly for the young, from his younger years up until probably the thriller era. It is very positive, and it's very informative. There's a lot of detail. I find that books tend to ignore or kind of summarize my views, because obviously most people are interested in his kind of solo career and, you know, him at his most successful. And so even for me, you know, with all the books that I've read, you don't normally get necessarily a detailed overview of, you know, the Motown and how they sort of went from Motown to the Jacksons and all that. You sort of know overall, but this actually did give quite a lot of detail and disputes between Berry Gordy and Joe and stuff like that. Those were kind of my main positives about the book. Daniela, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I Nicole briefly already addressed it. I found this rewind method. I found that really great, and it went well with me. In the pre-discussion we had, there were some opinions it didn't work that well. I thought for myself it worked really well. We all could agree that it was really good to have the sad part gone, and you go on into happier times. So, and then it's divided. It rewinds in different sections of Michael's life and career. And this is all chapters standing for themselves. So you have to rewind into the back, but if you come to the chapter in the back, this goes forward again. So that can be a little bit confusing, and I found this timeline helps very much with it. I really particularly liked the timeline because I always went back and said, "Oh, okay, in which point of time are we now?" I think this is especially good for people who didn't live the times, you know, to get some orientation. And in this rewind, there is always a bridge who brings you to the next chapter or picks you up with the last chapter on the top of the chapter. For example, here, it always points to the last one, and it's really important to read this top, because then you can make the connection, and then the next chapter starts, and then you go forward again. Yeah. So, well, I thought this is really good. It's a nice idea.
I did enjoy the rewind concept as well, and there were parts of the book where I didn't feel it was perhaps working as well as other parts, if that makes sense. So some parts it seemed to work well, and other parts it was quite choppy, as you said. It goes backwards, but then goes forward again, and that was a little bit sort of almost lacking in flow. But then I think perhaps the author's intention was to almost strip back the layers of the later years in life, the layers that, as he says it in the end, perhaps it's more the people who lived through his whole life. He refers to the younger fans as not necessarily having some of the issues that the older fans perhaps had with Michael later on in life. So it was almost as if his intention was to strip back the layers and come back to, I suppose, that raw talent that Michael had in the beginning and all the achievements that he did have. I think it was quite successful in that way, that concept of rewind, because it finishes so positively. Even though I had some times in the beginning where I was quite angry at the book, at the end, that rewind concept came back around, and it did work quite well in that it did strip it right back, and you end up with this quite positive feeling of this young boy and even young adult who obviously had an enormous amount of talent and sort of the world at his feet with everything yet to come. That's kind of the feeling you get at the end. And in that way, it worked really well, I think.
Yeah.
Probably the only other thing I had to add in regard to strengths, as you mentioned, Emma, it does talk really positively about sort of the Jackson's era, Jackson 5 era and the Jackson's era. And it is really good to have a book that gives a lot of attention to that time period, because we don't often see that. So there were some things throughout that section that were really good to read, because we don't see a lot of things that focus on that unless you start to get into some of the older books or the vintage era books. So that was nice to see. I really enjoyed reading the section on the Wiz, because they had a few quotes in there that spoke really highly of Michael as an actor. And when you think about how much he wanted to get into movies, it was just really nice to read sort of those quotes about his acting abilities and how it was almost like he took to it really naturally, and obviously had a natural affinity for it as well. So I really enjoyed that part.
I also enjoyed the discography. Discography, okay. Yeah. Oh, it's divided in the solo albums in younger years, and it's divided into the Jackson 5s and Jackson albums. And I think he managed quite well to describe these albums in a few words. to capture the essence of the albums in just a few words. I think this is also very nicely and good done.
Yeah, I enjoyed that section as well. I think it's nice to just, and the fact that it's illustrated, it has the album covers. That was nice to look through as you sort of flick through and get that little brief description. I was trying to find it so I could show a picture, but I can't seem to get my fingers in the right section at the moment.
I think
it is
as
a big
well,
book. It is a big book, yeah.
Yeah. I was about to say that I think that's one of the positives about it is its size and the quality of the pages. It reminded me a bit of The King's Soul, and I know that one of the reasons that people love that book is because of the size and the quality, and it does enhance the experience when you have these little pictures. You have a really good quality hardback. So I think that's a big positive. So what were the negatives? What didn't we like?
I think the biggest issue for me was, I'm not sure if it's the biggest issue. There was some statements in general that were either false or mistruths or twisted parts of the truth. But overall, for me, it was just the I keep referring to it as a contemptuous tone. And it's just sort of an undertone throughout certain sections that are just very negative and almost disrespectful towards Michael himself, that I really didn't enjoy. Obviously, just a couple of examples of the things that I mean. He refers to he's talking about the financial side of things in his later years, and he makes a comment along the lines of, must have been in reference to the estate, and how well the estate was going after he passed away, because now no one was frittering away the revenue with ostentatious regress. I just thought that was quite. It makes this assumption that Michael didn't deserve to be spending his money, and the fact too that it omitted any of his humanitarian work throughout pretty much the entire book, and then makes a comment about spending money in an ostentation fashion that's quite contemptuous in its tone. Not on its own, no, but if you add that to some of the other stuff, referring to a speech he made at one point, falteringly spoke English as if it was his second language, referred to his career being in gradual decline since Thriller, which I know is not technically incorrect, but I just find it a negative thing to say. And I know it's something that has always bothered me with regard to the way Michael is spoken about. Everybody refers back to Thriller and talks about Bad as being less successful. Well, it's Thriller. You can't, to suggest that Bad wasn't an outrageous success is not fair at all, because there has to be a biggest selling album of all time, and when you're the person with the biggest selling album of all time, doesn't mean that your next album is not glowingly successful and that your career is declining, in my opinion. Obviously, Bad had some things, 5 number ones from the one album, which Thriller didn't have, and the sales of Bad were enormous, same as Dangerous being a highly successful album in itself, and arguably the time period where Michael was the most famous that he was in his life. So I didn't, those sorts of references always annoy me as well. Referring to, like the baby dangling incident, and talking about his errors in judgment as a parent, referring to the money situation, I found quite rude. Of course, they were talking about how much financial turmoil he was in and how desperate he was. He needed a lifeline. yet mentioned nothing about the fact that he was asset rich and still had the catalogue, and obviously that could have been his lifeline, but just the way that they referred to it. And overall, I suppose that it's the disproportionate content that gives it that tone throughout those first chapters, particularly because, and I think this is the biggest problem with mainstream media, is the disproportionate content. They take one incident like the Jarvis Cocker incident, for example, and blow it out of proportion. It gets all this time and all this attention. The baby dangling incident gets all this time and all this attention. They're tiny little snippets, tiny little events, and whole albums that he spent years working on and years promoting get less attention than those things. And I find that disproportionate content is what skews a lot of public opinion on Michael. Same as the humanitarian efforts. I did write down there was 2 mentions of his humanitarian efforts in his entire life, which we know, there's an entire book on how much humanitarian work that Michael did in his lifetime. And yet in the book, it briefly mentions it at one point, and it only mentions because it says something about his Heal the World Foundation in relation to the Dangerous Tour. It doesn't actually mention any humanitarian work. And then on another instance, it mentions that he was awarded for his humanitarian work, but doesn't actually explain any work that he did. So again, disproportionate in terms of focusing on all of these tiny little events that make him look crazy or erratic because it fits the narrative, but not necessarily giving as much attention due to the albums and all the achievements and the humanitarian efforts. And it obviously skews opinion a particular way.
Yeah, I had the same issues as you, Nicole. I don't think it's only an impression I have. It's just a feeling, and it's also he took a lot of stuff from other people, and yes, he gives the footnotes and he makes endnotes here where he has his information from. There is a very extensive part of endnotes, and it's all detailed laid out where is the information from. But I think he just pulled on the wrong sources. Okay, now you can say in older days there was just no, when these old sources were written, there was no other information available. So that was the information that time. But in the time this book is written, so much, or I think almost everything of what he writes here, making statements in these endnotes where he got the information from, is known fact that it's not true. It's proven different. And this is was my issue. I put together a book like this. I call myself a music journalist. And then I go back to these sources with this, okay, but my work as a journalist, I would see in fact checking, is this still true? I do not just copy and paste. And this is a copy and paste job for me. The first chapters in the end is a different thing. I don't know what happened, but it's a different thing. But the first chapters is copy and paste without fact checking.
Those
and it's a pity because the book and the idea is so wonderful.
Sorry, Danielle, with the delay, I think I might have cut you off there, but it's hard with the delay, isn't it? But I think with you saying too about the quotes that he's using, and I checked myself because similarly to the way that we spoke last month about Making Michael, some of the footnotes are in there, and you can flick to the back to where those references are listed, and you can see where he's taken a particular quote from. And many of the ones that I had a problem with, I would flick back and it would either be Tabarelli or some sort of a BBC article or some tabloid, and you'd think to yourself, well, that's why you're saying that, because as we know, the tabloids and there's plenty of stuff in Tabarelli's book that's based on those tabloids as well, and that's why we probably have a problem with many of those things. Although some of the statements that are made that I also had a problem with were not referenced at all. They're just the words of the author. And as well as there being obviously that quite negative tone in the way that he's spoken about, there's also some blatant misinformation and incorrect information, which, as Michael Jackson fans, particularly those of us on the book club who read a lot about him, when we read something that's untrue, particularly something we've been fighting against for a long time, it's infuriating and offensive to read something that's completely false and completely wrong.
It just comes back again to the journalistic work not being proper done.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just copy and paste and you take it over and you don't check yourself.
What I found really frustrating is there were parts of it where I felt like he was trying to be an unbiased writer. Okay, and I'll always have respect for that. If you want to present, you know, both sides of the argument and whatever, I understand, you know, why journalists or writers want to do that. My issue with this is there were certain parts where I felt like he was trying to be unbiased. So, for example, when he dealt with the allegations, both of them, so the Chana and Arvizo, when he dealt with both of them, he kind of, I would say he spent more time on the allegations from the family's point of view. So he did say some things that was pretty, you know, that kind of made it clear that what side he was on, that he probably believed that there was something. But then he did sort of very fleetingly and very quickly on both occasions, he kind of sort of said, oh, you know, well, this happened, so, you know, maybe there was sort of an ulterior motive for Evan Chandler, and oh, well, the family, they were initially sort of loyal, but then this, but it was sort of over very quickly, right? So on things like that, he semi offered both sides, but there was so much to the book where it was subjective, you know, where he's like, I mean, Nicole, I know you said that you felt he was quite positive about a lot of his albums and a lot of his later work, but I disagree. I think he makes it really clear on a number of occasions how everything post Thriller was basically crap. I mean, he called actually some songs on Thriller sort of above average. That was on page 112, but said that there were 4 killer songs on that, but there are sort of 5 other above average songs. He then says on page 125 that Triumph, Off the Wall, Destiny and Thriller represent the entire Michael Jackson legacy. So how can you possibly just completely ignore everything that came after Thriller, which arguably, and I know that we've discussed this on numerous occasions, you know, it in some ways, a lot of what came after Thriller is really what kind of excelled him into the stardom that he received. Thriller was, I felt, kind of the start of the launch of his huge solo career. But I feel like, you know, it was albums like Bad and Dangerous that really made him the international superstar that he was, and how that work can just be completely ignored and completely dismissed. And I'm just uncomfortable with somebody giving that kind of subjective opinion. If I write a book about his career, it has to be an unbiased, objective view. And yet, you know, very, very frequently he calls, like, I mean, he said that the reason that Invincible was a failure was because You Rock My World was not a strong song. I mean, it's like ridiculous. So don't worry about all what happened with Sony and the fact that they didn't promote the album. You know, the reason that album failed was because You Rock My World was a crap song. I mean, like, really?
I think Emma is stuck.
Am I stuck?
Then, now you're back again. Okay. Now I want to say,
Okay.
in my opinion, it also like, yeah, he says, yeah, his work was done with Thriller. He's totally missing out the artistic growth and the growth as a musician and as a music writer. Michael had his whole journey, you know, this development. Of course, that wasn't like Thriller, and Dangerous wasn't like Bad, and Invincible was totally different again, But this is, I think this is something very particular about Michael Jackson, because these albums were all so different, I can remember long ago, my mom and my dad, they went like 900 kilometers, and when they came up to their destination, they realized they listened to the whole cassette in the car, for 9 hours. This could not happen with Michael Jackson. They are very distinguished. They're all very different, and he's missing out on this,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he does say some quite negative things along the way.
Yeah, he just completely ignores this. Yeah, the artistic growth, the artistic development. Yeah,
and it completely ignores also the some of the sort of like civil rights statements and things of history sort of get overlooked a little bit, and any of those songs that were making strong statements, it's as if, I don't know if he's overlooked some of that, or if he just didn't care for it, or what the issue was there. I think he makes a comment in Bad along the lines of he speaks about some of the songs obviously quite highly, and then he's quite dismissive of others. There's a negative comment about Speed Demon, and that being, I can't remember the way that he speaks about it, and I didn't write it down, but it's it just made me think, oh, okay, there's a part of that song that you're completely missing, and you don't actually understand some of the small references that are in that song that give it that lead into some of his later work that have been just overlooked or dismissed, and maybe that's that lack of research and lack of looking into things that we've mentioned earlier as well.
Yeah, that's why I said he just doesn't know his stuff. He's writing about something he doesn't really know.
Yep.
My impression.
He quotes Nelson George quite a lot, and some of the quotes that have come from him for me are just really outrageous. I mean, there's one on page 4, like your heart, he got into the book, and it says, as Nelson George writes, between 2002 and 2009, he released no new music. Between the domestic backlash, arguments with his record label, and his own indulgent production process and lifestyle, a man once so consumed with work stopped doing what he had been born to do. And I'm like, hold on a minute. For someone who's writing about Michael Jackson, like, what about the huge event in 2005 of the child allegations and the trial? I mean, how can you focus more on, someone's indulgent lifestyle and blame that for not releasing any new music, when the main reason that no new music would have been produced in that time is because, once again, he was accused of child abuse, and there was a huge trial that went on. I mean, to me, it's just crazy. And he quotes this Nelson George quite a lot. Nelson George, I don't know too much about him. I think he wrote one book, and I think I know the book that he did write, but I haven't read it yet. But Nelson George seems to say quite a few things that are, that are quite meaning, for sure. And another thing that came through to me throughout the whole book was that everything was of Michael's own doing. All of his suffering was his own doing, his own creation. Everything was his fault. Nothing was anyone else's fault. The media weren't to blame. The families who made the accusations, they weren't to blame. It was all, everything was of Michael's own doing, and he was to blame for everything. And, when you start reading that kind of stuff, it just becomes clear that he really just does not have any clue what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I have a quote that links into what you were saying, Emma, that and I think we were both probably equally, well, all three of us would probably equally outraged over this quote, but it kind of sums up some of those things that you were just iterating just then. Jackson's erratic behavior, such as making his children wear masks in public, can now be read as the actions of a man who had lost every last shard of trust in the media that had made him. He had created his character, now he had to live with it, and he seemed to be having problems living with it. At that point, I wanted to throw the book.
Yeah, that was one point for me too. I was quite. That's why I said.
First of all, the media that made him. I mean, what a ridiculously offensive thing to say. I mean, it was his talent and his innovation, his dedication, his hard work. It was all of those things that made him. The media might be involved in, I guess, getting the word out to people, but it was the media who failed him on so many occasions. They made up lies, they told untruths, they used him to make billions of dollars off sensationalized headlines and spin false accusations and basically disrespect him for decades in their attempt to create this false narrative and to make billions of dollars off of him. This idea that he owed them something, that quote suggests he owed them something. He didn't owe them anything. It also suggests that he was erratic for distrusting them. How ridiculous. Anybody who knows
and for protecting his children against the very sort of institution that literally ruined his life.
Yeah,
that's right. It suggests that his behavior towards the media makes no sense, but it makes complete sense. And it's another thing about that, it comes back to that, what they choose to focus on, what I said before about disproportionate content, because they want to throw in this, I say they, because it's this journalist as well as many of most of the journalists over the decades that have been portraying Michael, but they want to throw things around like the masks without any explanation. Anyone who hears the explanation of why he made his children wear masks would think it was completely reasonable. In fact, the vast majority of people who have ever said it to me, and I've explained it to them, as soon as you explain it to them, they say, oh, that's actually quite clever. The fact that his children were able to maintain some anonymity and were able to go out in public without him and enjoy some of the things they couldn't enjoy being Michael Jackson's children. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
But also,
the media is never going to
the comparison to these days. Sorry, the comparison to these days with social media. Yeah, how many celebrities do you see who take pictures with their kids, and their kids' faces are in some way they're censored? So they might put like an emoji over the baby's face or something. Like, how is that any different? Michael didn't have all this stuff available to him when the media are after his children. So what he had to do was deal with what he had at the time, which were masks. What is the difference between asking a child to wear a mask or putting a mask on your child to protect their identity to now doing what hundreds of celebrities do, which is post pictures of their children? So they post pictures of their children online. So it's not even like paparazzi shots. They'll put the pictures up, but they're censoring their child's face. What is the difference? You don't get people saying to these celebrities, oh, well, you're weird because you're protecting your child's identity. It's like, why do you have to explain to people why he put masks on his children? Surely it's obvious why you'd put masks on your children. When you're in that sort of limelight, you're doing it to protect your children. How is that remotely erratic behavior?
But we have to explain it to people because for so long the media portrayed it as this ridiculous thing. Like, if the media didn't do that for so long, that we wouldn't have to explain it now.
Yeah.
It's because it is just automatically seen as this crazy thing to do because of the way that Michael Jackson was portrayed. And it's not just this one thing, obviously. We know they'd pick tiny little snippets of things and focus so heavily on those that it made him look ridiculous. So then, of course, when they say, oh, look at him putting masks on his children, everybody just buys into this idea that it's an erratic thing to do.
Yeah, I would really not mind addressing these things in a book like this. Yes, because these were subjects in the past and there was a lot said and written and people, this is what people know. But please, please be a serious journalist and shed some light on why this was done. Exactly what you said, Nicole. No? Don't just say it's like this and this, or it was like this and this, but also tell why. No, there is a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing would really like, whoa, why I was ready to put this book aside, and if it would not have been the session coming up, I would have stopped reading latest there. No? That is side. Oh, I can't read. Wait. 63. There's the picture from Madonna and Michael Jackson, and then it goes into this wacko-jacko business. Yeah, I think that the whole side and half of the other side of the next side is just so off. Yeah, it has been said that in order to keep the press at bay, Jackson was party to construct his wacko-jacko character. Who constructed the wacko-jacko character? Michael? No. It was British media called it like this. And even today I see like journalists referring to Jacko. I mean, yeah, because it was just so picked up and so normal to use now. Yeah. Like other well-known pop eccentrics, he felt it was good for business feeding the press machine while enabling an artist discreetly to continue with his own life. Yeah. What had become interesting tics were now becoming major characteristics, and tales rose from the Jackson camp like smoke from a bonfire on a fall evening. Yeah. Okay. No, I don't want to even go further on. Yeah. Yeah, and then it comes all about the oxygen chamber, sleeping beauty castle. It's obvious he is going through one king hell identity crisis. Questioning the need of all cosmetic changes that left, and then just like so shrewd sentences like this, whether it was skin bleaching or the skin lightening disease vitiligo, Michael Jackson began to get whiter. Whether it was the skin, we know it was vitiligo now. Please don't write that.
Yeah,
we know.
I had that one.
Check it. Well. We know it was vitiligo.
He does.
And he did not change his appearance. His appearance changed if he wants it or not. Yeah. He did not do that. Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to add, it is confirmed earlier on in the book. Like he does say early on about the vitiligo, but then he does question it later on. And it's just that same, like, well, just planting of a negative seed, isn't it? Like, why is there a need to even write that question? We know that it was, so don't even write it as a question.
It's no different to what the media have done for the last like 40 years.
Yeah,
it's exactly the same thing.
And I think we need to.
It's exactly, there's no change. I mean, you could easily he could have written, despite people thought earlier on he was skin bleaching. Yeah, vitiligo changed his appearance. Yeah. Skin disease, vitiligo changes. It's just a few words. Why are you doing this? Sensationalism. Sensationalism.
Yeah.
I think we need to mention.
And that's what I was saying as well about the allegation. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, it's what I was saying before about the allegations. I mean, like on page 52, well, there's almost sort of a whole chapter on it, but on page 52, this is where sort of he introduces the Chan family, and he talks about Michael befriending Geordie, and you know, it's all very like sympathetic towards the family. So, you know, it's always like, oh, Michael, you know, behaving in this way, and it was making June really uncomfortable, but this was the excuse for why she allowed it to carry on, right? And this happens to occasions. Oh, she did notice this and she was uncomfortable with it, but you know, she was too scared to say anything, or you know, well, he started like calling him every night, and that made her feel uncomfortable. But oh, this is how I'm going to sort of explain it away. It's like pages of basically insinuating that Michael constructed this whole friendship, and it was very like insidious and stuff like that. And then and then like talking, this really wound me up as well about the evidence. So on page 54, it says the police moved in and searched Neverland, yet nothing deeply incriminating was found. We all know nothing was found ever. Like, forget deeply incriminating, nothing was found ever.
Why
but
put
you
this
know,
word,
nothing deeply incriminating was found. There were supposedly books of other boys that Jackson was unaware of. He suggested that Frank had them. As the days progressed, it became apparent that Evan Chandler owed $68,000 in child support payments, so perhaps there was an ulterior motive at play. And that is the extent. I mean, if you look at all what we look, I mean, obviously we knew a lot of it anyway, but if you look at what Square One as the documentary presented in terms of against the Chandlers and how this was all, you know, nothing other than exploitation, you can summarize that exploitation that is so obvious in one sentence, and yet you're going to spend the whole rest of the chapters you know, stuff that he includes. And I this, I asked the girls about this. It says that Jackson had a special code. I'd never heard this before, and this was when I nearly threw the books, and Nicole did it on a different. I was like, what even is this, and where's he got this from? So apparently Jackson had a special code with Geordie that they were to say 3 times a day in the hope it would come true, right? So this was the code, apparently. Number 1, no wenches, bitches, heifers, or hoes. I mean, can you ever, like, I know that Michael swore, and like people have come out and told stories that he did swear, and like what shocked her, of course he swore. But could you ever imagine Michael saying that? Number 2, never give up on your bliss. Number 3, live with me in Neverland forever. Number 4, no conditioning. Number 5, never numbers be better than best friend. The fact that he's including that, which apparently came from, I think that came from the All That Glitters book. Why is he even including that? And this is what I'm talking about. If you're going to write an unbiased, objective, factual book on Michael's career, why on earth are you including absolute nonsense like that? It has to be because there's an agenda there to, you know, yes, in one sentence he throws the other side, or maybe there's an ulterior motive, but you've just spent 4 pages telling us why we should believe he is a paedophile. So, you know, it just, I just can't.
And then possibly the worst part in that section is the fact that I can't find it. I've just been trying to find it as you've been talking, but where it says that
yeah, it's 52.
Essentially that the Geordie's drawing and the strip search were never. What's the wording that it uses?
It was never. I think it was never. It was never verified if the picture matched.
Never verified. Well, that's just a load of bollocks, and we know that that's been verified. We know that it was untrue. There's been statements to that effect issued, and tiny little snippets in things. But of course, that doesn't get promoted by the mainstream media. So this journalist wouldn't find that because he's only using tabloids and mainstream things to access his information. And again, it comes like, look at the enormous section dedicated to the Chandler situation, and yet, you know, painting that negative picture. And then, of course, we know that other sections are not given anywhere near as much attention. It just paints an awful picture.
Something that really interested me within that chapter and within the Chandler section, on page 53, it's basically going on about, Michael being under investigation for allegations of child molestation against Geordie Chandler, etc. And then it says, this was truly shocking. The nation's biggest idol was in trouble, confirming everyone's worst suspicion that he was more than just eccentric. And for me, that is the truest thing that is spoken in this whole book, because that's exactly what happened. People, because of all the other things, and I've said this time and time and time again, if Michael's image was not how it was, i.e. if he didn't have the vitiligo, if his appearance wasn't different, if he stayed as the sort of, obviously we all think he was handsome as he turned out anyway, but if he stayed as the handsome black man, I'm not sure that the allegations would ever have had legs. They had legs because he looked weird, he looked eccentric, his life was eccentric, and so people wanted to believe there was something more insidious to his being and to his character. And for me, that is absolutely 100% true. People, and to this day, the reason why people cannot accept the continuous proof that Michael is innocent is because they want to believe that he was guilty. And it was the same thing when these allegations came out in '93. The fact that he'd already sort of had this change in image, the media was already like rolling with this wacko jacko stuff, and he's a big weirdo and he's a freak and this, that and the other. When you slap a child abuse allegation on someone like that, people want to believe it because it almost verifies their thinking that he is this eccentric person, that he's not normal, that he's abnormal, that he's weird, that he's all these things that they've been led to believe that he is. It gives them further verification of that. And, that's exactly what happened. This wasn't born out of nothing. That the media built up this image of him, and then the allegations just essentially confirmed that image. And that's why to this day, people are so unwilling to accept that he's innocent.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just wanted to add one thing to what you said, though. The other big thing, I think, that just to add to everything that you said about why the allegations had legs at the time, all through the 80s, the fact that he was this musician who was famous and so successful, but that he never had, a series of girlfriends like all of the others would have, and the fact that he had no real serious relationships, I think that kind of was another reason why people kind of assumed there was something odd about him, if that makes sense. And it also was, when you go back to the time in particular, the media did another almost created him as this asexual person, because it was just assumed when he went on a date with Madonna that there was nothing going on. It was just assumed that there was nothing going on with Brooke Shields, because that's the way that the media portrayed it. And I think that added fuel to what you were saying with the way that he was seen, and why the allegations were just believed, because people had these, what's the word I'm looking for? They just had these negative feelings about it, but a part of that was how he was portrayed.
Yeah. How did you go into, Nicole, you were talking about the tone before, and to give something else that made me feel just like, again, I just think it's very telling about the writer and about his kind of agenda, really, is on page 44. It's talking about meeting Debbie Rowe, and it says, this is the quote, "She had been there to attend to his scrotum." I mean, like, is that really necessary?
No.
Like, why?
No.
Other than to demean their relationship, demean her, to demean him, and to sort of undermine, just make them look silly. It makes them look like that's an embarrassing statement to make, even if that is true. I don't understand why that has to be put there. It's just, and this is what Nicole was saying about the tone of the book. He says lots of things that, again, continues and exacerbates this image that, you know, Michael was not to be taken seriously, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Why would you take on a job like this? I don't know. In this state of mind, no? Yeah.
It is worth saying that this, while Nicole's popped off for a minute, we did actually do a little bit of research on the author, because when we started to read things that we didn't like, I mean, I think a lot of us assumed that this was, you know, a fan's book, a fan's piece of writing.
No, it isn't. It isn't. No.
No, but if you actually look at his list of books that he's written, he's essentially written loads of books on, you know, different huge celebrities. So he's written one on Madonna, one on Beyonce, one on the Supremes. Who was the other big star that he's done? And again, you can see what he's trying to do, what he's trying to get out of his writing. It reminds me of the guy, he slipped my mind, the name slipped my mind, but the guy who released Bad last year, you know, what's the guy's name? But anyway, there was that book Bad released last year, and it was basically talking about how Michael was guilty of all the allegations. And again, if you look into what he does, he's the same thing. He's like a sensationalist writer. That's what they do. They write about different celebrities, whoever's hot at the time, whoever they think might sell, that they write about. And that's what this guy's about, basically. He doesn't really have any interest in Michael. It's just, you know, he's a huge celebrity, therefore I might get a big audience with this book, and that's it. And it's, yeah, it is a,
yeah, he writes for money. He probably writes for money. No, you have to have so many perverts, and yeah, it's a pity for this book. Yeah, I think the idea of the book was really nice, and probably it wasn't his idea of how it's done. And then he was contracted to write. That's what I could think of. Mm-hmm.
I feel like it does come across that he was possibly a fan of the Jacksons in the later 70s and early 80s. Like, he does speak quite glowingly about that particular period. I think that he was possibly a fan in those late 70s, early 80s type period. And it's almost as if he takes offense to the way things went from that point onwards. And I know there are some people who have those views because they buy into all the media negativity and the media portrayal. But obviously, as a fan who's you know, been following Michael's whole career, and even someone that lived through the whole thing and maintains their fandom, I suppose, is going to be offended by those earlier chapters because it is very negative.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't he get the thing wrong about ghosts? I'm sure he said that the mayor. Yeah, I mean, he hates ghosts. He made that really clear, that it was really silly and the whole thing was pointless and it was all laughable. But I'm sure he said that the mayor was meant to represent Tom Sneddon. And I'm like, well, this is where you need to go and do your research, because it had nothing to do with Tom Sneddon.
I mean, that has been said. That has been said that it was meant to be Tom Sneddon. I have heard that from other sources as well.
This is common knowledge.
No, but in terms of how he was, I mean, maybe the character and the sort of the relationship that he had with him, maybe from that point of view, it's meant to be Tom Sneddon. But wasn't he meant to sort of look like that racist sheriff, wasn't it, who had something to do with Emmett Till?
Yeah.
So, you know, and like that's something that's really important, and that's really like a really important point. And yet again, it was not even mentioned.
But it's that deeper
so it
layer
wasn't
of
actually crap. It's just that you didn't get it. You haven't done enough research into it to understand the message that he was trying to put across.
But it seems like perhaps like that particular thing that you're mentioning there with the mayor of Ghosts relates back to, I mean, Michael obviously had a lot of civil rights and like undertones in a lot of his art, basically. And I think this author has completely missed any of those. You know, in the same way that there's particular video playing on this TV in screen that's relating to the way police were treating a black person in that particular instance, that would be completely missed by this author. The representation of the mayor has been completely missed. And Speed Demon, he dismisses that as if it's a nothing song, when there's actually some racial messages in that song, the way that he uses the term boy, that's how the police officer would speak to him. We all obviously know that there's the use of the word boy has that racial connection. It's as if this author has completely dismissed all of that. It's that deeper layer to Michael's art that's always been dismissed.
He only knows the surface, but he totally missed out on the fine-tuning.
Yeah.
Didn't go deep enough.
Yeah. This is why I earlier said, if you want to buy this book, maybe it's a good book to give somebody a present who just likes the music. Yeah. It's a posh gift. Yeah. You can lay it out on your coffee table. You flip through, you say, oh, what a wonderful book, but just don't read it. Yeah.
That's what I said earlier on, is earlier in the week, I said, yes, it would make a lovely coffee table book to flick through and to never read.
Yeah. Or give it to, I mean, I know lots of people, they call themselves fans. In their opinion, they are fans, and they have no idea about Michael Jackson. They know the Thriller album, and they know he moonwalks, and they just like occasionally listen to the music. So my cousin is one of them. Great gift for him. Really great gift for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no deep diving, please. Not even snorkeling.
It's such a shame, though, isn't it? Because we were all drawn in to that cover.
I know.
And that the concept of rewind really is a cool concept. I did enjoy the read going backwards. It did feel almost uplifting in some ways, that the heaviness of the later years was done at the beginning, and then it got lighter as it went on. It was refreshing to read it that way. So the concept is cool, and obviously the cover is I really just love the cover, and the back obviously as well. But yeah, all of those, the misinformation and the tabloid heavy focus is not enjoyable at all. And even the way that he speaks about Michael's death, and again, it's another book that totally believes the word of Conrad Murray. I mean, this is the man who was convicted of killing him and spent years in prison. Why are we believing what he says? It's totally taken as gospel that Conrad Murray was trying to wean him off his milk. I mean, for goodness sake, why are we believing this man? Frustrates me. It really, really frustrates me.
Yeah.
Well, this is from a man who says on page 68, he's calling about in the closet. And the way, when I read Michael Jackson books, I highlight stuff that I love, or that I'm like learning for the first time. And this book is full of highlights, and it's all stuff that I found an issue with, or stuff that made me angry. And on page 68, he says about in the closet, it's cool for whatever people do or say to each other to be kept in the closet could later be perceived as carrying deepens.
Oh, I was gone again.
Seriously. Oh, like,
one more time,
you know,
Emma,
him
you are
actually
stuck.
speaking to another woman.
From the beginning, Emma, we didn't get anything.
Oh, sorry. I was saying on page 68, he's talking about in the closet, and he says, it's cool for whatever two people do or say to each other to be kept in the closet could later be perceived as carrying deeper meanings. So basically insinuating that he's having relationships with people.
Again a pinch. No? Yeah.
Yeah. I had that same quote written down in my list of things that just contribute to that contemptuous tone. It's like these little planting of seeds throughout to just make you think these negative things. And that's what the mainstream media has been doing for decades.
Yeah.
And it's
and what's really interesting is you guys were talking about gifting the book, right? And this is the sort of thing that would happen. So someone would gift that book to someone who's not like a major fan or whatever, and then they would read that, and then that's, you know, that seed is planted in their brain, and then this is how it continues.
What I
so
think
we are not gifting this book.
No.
I know,
like Emma, you were saying about your highlights. I don't normally write in my books because I like them to stay pristine. I like them to be perfect. But with this book, I took a pen and I've written all over it. Every time I read something false, I've underlined it, and I've got words written all around it, because if this ever something happens to me and it gets given away or sold off, then whoever's going to read it is going to know every single thing that's wrong. And all of us as fans, we need to start doing that, so that when our books are left behind, when we go, that all of that, you know, somebody reads this book now, and the truth's going to be in there now. So we should all start doing that.
So before you gift it, amend it.
maybe we should just burn it before it happens to us.
Or you give it as a present and you say, but don't believe what it's in there.
I could gift mine now, because it's all the truth's been told now throughout my book. I can gift it now.
Nicole, maybe we should get it republished with the Nicole Aikens edition.
Yeah,
with all the
it would be a better edition.
Yeah.
There's nice pictures. You cannot say any different. The pictures are really nice. No, and I found one picture I did not know yet. Hard to believe, but I found one picture I did not know yet. It's Jermaine's wedding picture. Never seen that before.
Oh yeah.
I feel like perhaps he had a shortage of pictures to choose from in those later years, because he's got some random things in the last couple of chapters. Like he didn't have enough pictures, so he's just thrown in it. Like
wait, is Jermaine's wedding picture? Yeah, I wondered, why is this in there?
Yeah, there's a few pictures in the end where you think, why have you put
172. That? Never seen picture. It's Jermaine's wedding picture.
Yeah, some of the choices at the end are a bit odd, but I mean, there are some lovely photos, and like I said, there is some positive.
You know, I was tending to think, why is the end so nice? Because that's set history. You know, this is common history. This is history accepted by everybody. So don't touch on this anymore. Yeah, I mean, probably there is as much wrong in this Jackson 5 and Jackson history we know than what actually went on. But this is commonly accepted like this. This is the story that whatever Diana Ross introduced them, and blah blah blah, and this is the story, and this is the story told, and it is accepted story, and this will stay for eternity like this. Yeah, nobody questioning anymore. And this is what it has, not this bad undertone.
I had one thing that I wanted to ask you guys about. I mean, I don't know if you can enlighten me, but it's something that I would actually like to research more, because one of the things that was said throughout this book, and that I've read in other books and heard in documentaries and stuff, is basically how much more popular Michael was in the rest of the world in comparison to the USA, right? And I knew that that was kind of true, like in his later years, but even like in some of the earlier stuff, like when they were talking about Jackson's, I can't remember what specific era, a specific album or a specific year or something. Like, I think when Michael was like super young, he was like, the States loved him, and then as he got older, not so much, and then they sort of loved him again with the off the wall thriller stuff, and then like they kind of rejected him again. And I just wondered, like, culturally, what is so different in the USA that happened? I'm really interested to know, because I've heard it so often that particularly in the UK, he was really embraced. And I think he said it himself, actually, that he always felt really embraced here in particular, but including in Europe. I know Japan was a huge, like there was a huge fan base in Japan for him. But I just wonder what happened in the USA where, you know, he wasn't sort of, it's like he wasn't quite as welcome there.
Yeah, it's.
I don't know. I'll have to do some research on it. I don't know.
It's something that's always intrigued me, I suppose, as well, because yeah, when was that point, I suppose, when it obviously the allegations were more heavily focused on in the US, and obviously post allegations, we know, like even look at the history promotion, and the history tour never even went inside the US apart from Hawaii. All the statues that were put throughout Europe that weren't even, there was nothing to do with that in the US. So we know post allegations, obviously the allegations had more of an impact. There was I read something recently. Was that in Making Michael? I get confused as to where I read everything, because everything starts to blur into one spot. But where no, I don't think it was Making Michael, but that post allegations, I think it might have been marketing information, suggested that the vast majority of people didn't believe the allegations outside of the US, but there was a much, much higher number that believed inside the US. So I guess that maybe has something to do with the media over there and the way that it was portrayed. So certainly that was a turning point. But there were times, I think even earlier on, where he was obviously very well received in other countries as well. I didn't know there was any stigma towards him prior to the allegations in the US, apart from, you know, like the deterioration from the mid 80s when, you know, things started to decline in the way that he was represented in the media, mid 80s onwards.
I always tend to think this is also this race issue what plays in the USA, or did play in the 80s still in the USA. And I know from Germany, I can tell there was never this heavy reporting on Michael. We had one teen magazine, what was Bravo, which was always very positive with Michael, but this was the major press for him. Yeah. I cannot recall that he went to all the newspapers or whatever with all he did and what. No, you could read in Bravo. No.
Yeah, Nicole, it's not that there was.
Yeah.
It's not that there was a stigma attached to Michael before then, but it was like, for example, there was definitely something that was bigger than this, but this is just one example. I mean, I suppose this is quite common, but anyway, on page 147, it's talking about Show You the Way to Go. And it was saying that it was like an enormous hit in the UK, it reached #1 for a week, and this happened and this happened, and they got this opportunity and this opportunity for it. And then, like in the US, it only reached number 28, and it was kind of very much like, you know, the US were not that interested in the Jacksons at that sort of time. And I just feel like when I do read about Michael's relationship with the US, it does seem like it's very like that. And you know, one thing that this book taught me is that peaks and drops seem to happen from a lot earlier. It's like you, I was all kind of post-Thriller that it went downhill for him, really. But I don't know, maybe it's just a difference in music styles and stuff. You know, obviously even now, like what's big in America isn't necessarily what's big over here and stuff. But I don't know, I just wondered why there was this kind of, there seemed to be a bit of a love-hate relationship with Michael Jackson in America, and I don't know, it might be something that I might look into further, because it'd be interesting to see.
In some instances, it's almost like there was an oversaturation, if that makes sense. Like so the early Motown years, they were putting out album after album, and they were going on all these shows, like almost like an oversaturation. And then obviously that's, you know, there was that lull then after that. So I don't know if maybe that has to do with the media over there and the way that they are so heavily focused on something that perhaps it then dulls down again, like the interest declines because there's that oversaturation.
It's a really good point.
Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so overview of the book, general opinion. I think we all agree, like there were positives to it, more from a visual point of view. Like we love the pictures, the quality, the size of the book, the front cover. But basically, a lot of the content is not good, and it's definitely this. I think this probably has to be the first book that we've discussed that we wouldn't recommend. I think all of the others that we've done so far, even if there were tidbits that we sort of disagreed with or whatever, we've pretty much really liked all of the other books and audio documentaries and stuff that we've discussed before. I think this is the first book, and it was kind of weird for us because we tend to approach everything from a positive standpoint. You know, we don't really like to sort of come on here and super criticize authors and stuff, but this was the first book and we were just like, we've got to be honest about this book, because I mean, yeah, we're going to be fair and we're going to discuss the positives, but you know what, we can't sell this book to fans so that they go and buy it, because this is definitely not one that we would recommend. And I think, yeah, we feel like we'd be doing you a disservice for sure if we were like, oh yeah, go and buy this, you'll find out loads of cool stuff. Like you won't find out that much that you didn't already, bar some stuff from his younger years, and in between those few bits of information you're going to find lots of things that will probably anger you, lots of things that you'll find are not true, they're inaccurate, and yeah, I think don't waste your time with this one. Maybe borrow it from a library or something if you can.
Unless you want to do what I said and buy a copy and write all over it so that you highlight all the errors and write all the correct information in so that we can spread the truth. Yeah, that's
please buy a used copy so no tree will die for this, no?
I was glad once I read the book that I actually bought this one through Facebook Marketplace, so I got it secondhand. So my money went to someone else. It didn't go directly to this author, so I'm pleased about that.
Yeah, I bought it. Mine is a used copy too. So, and I was really, yeah, it's such a pristine condition. Yeah, I thought, wow, and giving his book away, and it seems like unread. No.
I thought the same thing. Yeah. I wondered if the person that sold it was a fan, because sometimes when I see Michael Jackson things being sold, I often don't ask why they're selling. Sometimes I don't really want to know the reason in case it's a negative one. I don't want to know if that's who I'm buying something from, so I don't ask. But I wondered with this one, is it a real fan who just went, I don't want this book anymore because they read it and didn't like it? So perhaps it was that.
Mine was in such a good condition still. It's not now anymore, but yeah. Probably read until page 24 and then said, no, I'd sell it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it wasn't what we expected. And I think we're all quite disappointed because obviously we want to read, on the whole, we want to read positive books. We want to read books that we can, you know, say, oh my God, this book was amazing. And, you know, you guys have to buy it. And we learned this, that, and the other. And so, you know, we were quite disappointed when we were reading, and it very, very quickly became apparent it wasn't going to be that sort of book. But actually, I feel quite pleased that we've read it, and I feel quite pleased that we've discussed it on an open forum, because there are lots of books that, you know, members haven't read, or they ask their, you know, for reviews for and stuff. And so, like we've said, if we can give an honest review and say, well, actually, this is probably one to save your money on. And also, it's quite good, I think, to see what is being put in these negative books. You know, what are authors putting in there that people are reading that they shouldn't be reading? And I think that can sometimes give fans some ammunition as well to know what is being put out there, and kind of helps us to have that knowledge that we can go back and say, actually, no, this isn't true. So and so wrote this, but actually that's full of inaccuracies. Or so yeah, I don't regret reading it. I don't regret making a decision. It definitely wasn't what we expected, but I think it served a purpose. And yeah, we'll certainly be making a post within the group to summarize our feelings about this book and to sort of recommend that people don't that they don't buy it. Has anyone got anything final to add before I let everybody know about next month's session?
I just was going to add to what you said, that you know, yes, we want positive books, but we also just want them to be truthful. You know, like, if not everything can be presented always in a positive way, but if it's the truth, then that's what we want as fans. We don't want all these falsehoods and these incorrect narratives portrayed, which is what this book does.
Yeah, and I also think it's good that we did the book, because like lots of people will be the same like us. They are very drawn, or I was very drawn by this book because the way it looks, the way it presents itself, yeah, and it is not cheap. So I think we did a good thing reviewing this book.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, great. So next month we are going to be holding a slightly different session. So we're not going to be focusing on one book next month. We've got a special session planned in relation to, of course, Vindication Day. So I believe we're going to do the session on Sunday, the 13th of June, but I will confirm that nearer the time. But what we essentially want to use that session to discuss is all of the, again, truthful and valuable and kind of verified literature. So not just books, there's some amazing websites, some amazing articles that have been written, documentaries. Yes, the focus will heavily be on literature, but I think obviously there's been some unbelievable documentaries that have come out, particularly in the last couple of years, in response to Leaving Neverland, that we want to discuss, promote, to allow people really the opportunity to improve their knowledge of the allegations, not just obviously the historic ones, but with what's going on at the moment with Leaving Neverland, Dan Reed, Wade Robson, etc. So what we are going to do next month is, rather than focusing on a specific book, we're going to be collating all of the most useful and informative literature or sources that there are to inform you a bit better about all of the allegations, and we thought it would be, we've always wanted to kind of focus on a book that deals with the allegations, and it's something that's come up in conversation a few times, and we've kind of debated about whether we should do it or not, and we definitely at some point we will focus on, for example, Aphrodite Jones' book. I know that there was an author interview, I think it was last year, with her, which was really interesting. But I think for the purpose of next month, and with everything that's going on with the Leaving Neverland stuff, we thought it would be really useful to have a discussion, and maybe we can learn some stuff as well about where you can go to find out more and arm yourself with more information about the allegations. So that's what we're going to do next month. And then in July, I think that we are probably going to study Jermaine's book, which we're all super excited about. It's something that's like been really high on the priority list for many months. There's just so many books that we want to cover. It's really hard to choose when to do which. But I think that it's time to do that one. And then we've got a super exciting surprise for August, which I'm not going to reveal now. So next month, allegations, not one book, but just come and join the discussion and share your information. Maybe there's books from non-English speaking countries that you might be able to share that might not be so widely known. And then if you purchase a copy, if you don't already have it, of Jermaine's book ready to discuss in July, then yeah, we look forward to talking with you about that then. So thanks for joining us, everybody, this evening, and we'll see you in a few weeks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.